What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Pro Be Pro. Really fun week there at Craig Ranch. I know, Justin, not your favorite golf course. I'll tell you what, it's become one of my favorites. I wish they played every event there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like you see the deviation and to get lucky once with last year, but to have not just you, not just me, but so many FTN guys just see the top of all these leaderboards. Maybe there might be something to all this course fit and kind of going with some home course knowledge to go with it. And yeah, it's crazy because I had so many guys that had such a chance in my 200 single. I think I finished 80th or whatever because I had somebody miss the cut, but just it was all built around the same core.
Yeah, it really was. And the core, I know for a lot of people, came from my hot takes article. I want to make the point. The hot takes article comes from the GPP scores. So you can give me all the credit if you want. I'll happily take it, but the model deserves the credit at the end of the day. So super fun week. Hopefully we can have more of that success this week at the Wells Fargo. And I will say, along those lines, we do have another really strong course fit model, this one at the Wells Fargo. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but yeah, is there anything specific that you think is worth really going over about Craig Ranch and this past week at the Byron Nelson?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of narratives. Obviously, it came down to how far you hit your tee ball in the air. Mm-hmm. A lot of what, I reiterated on the show. You saw very little roll. Mm-hmm. You also saw the ability to get up and down. If you miss a green there, it's pretty easy around the green. So if you're a good chipper, you're going to get it up and down a lot. I do want to talk a little bit about the people that are going to play devil's advocate and say, well, what about Ben Coles? He should have won, right? It makes the only bogey on 18. It just shows you how much volatility there is in the game of golf. I mean, I think I even put on Twitter, how volatile golf is if out of form Zach Johnson is around the leaderboard. Like he hits it nowhere in the air, but I mean, he literally just got it up and down from everywhere. And the course was easy enough that if you hit a couple of good iron shots, you could be around there. That being said, I'll take our chances with 17 guys in the top 25 over the randoms that show up because, they are still all PGA Tour players. And if they play, I would say Coles would agree that he pretty much had his A game all week in a softer field and was able to be in contention, not taking anything away from him at all.
Do you think that's where the industry narrative comes from, where we heard a lot this week about like this golf course is all about iron play and off the tee doesn't matter as much, so guys who aren't as long can compete? Do you think it's coming from the fact that there are guys like Ben Coles each year who happen to contend?
I mean, maybe. My thought process behind that is, well, let's just go with Coles and let's call it a Min Woo Lee. So we all know, we've talked about on the show a lot, his approach game is not very good. It's probably his biggest weakness and the reason we don't see him contend week in and week out. But Ben Coles' best approach shot with a 7-iron is not going to be any better than Min Woo Lee's worst shot with a wedge. So, like, you can talk about it all you want as far as, yes, it is about approach, but if you can't hit a 7-iron closer than these guys that hit it so much further hitting a wedge, you're looking at all the wrong numbers, in my opinion, right? So I think that, a guy's this good can get hot with a 6 and 7-iron. I'm telling you, I wear my 7-iron out every time I play there. Whereas, sure, I might be able to hit a 7-iron closer than you can hit a 7-iron, but I cannot hit a 7-iron closer than you can hit a wedge.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and it's so interesting because you and I have very different processes. Like, you came on here a week ago. You said, this is a golf course that I know extremely well. I've played it a million times. It's all about how far you can fly the ball off the tee. Our course fit model tells us it's all about distance off the tee and around the green play, which, as you pointed out, we saw as a driving force for scoring on some of the shorter par 4s and all of the par 5s. So it's weird that at least for this week, the industry narrative was just so incredibly opposite of the course fit model and of your personal analysis. It's almost hard to understand how that large of a difference can come to fruition, but it's also a good reminder of the fact that that's why those weeks when we actually get that large of a discrepancy between what the industry thinks and what we think with the course fit model, we have to take advantage. And fortunately, in the last 2 years with Byron Nelson, we have done exactly that.
Yeah, and I think that we kind of look at this stuff this similar to the way that we look at golf, right? With the high volatility, like we prefer the high volatility. Because when we don't want to min cash, like we would rather get blanked and then win than min cash every week, and that's just kind of the way that we look at this. And when we get this different than the rest of the industry, I think it just shows exactly what we're talking about, right? This is a great time to point out of like, hey, we were very different, and our different turned out to be the right different, but we were also not afraid to be the wrong different, right? And not min cash. I'm that there's no issue with that either. So, I think we're onto something, and maybe we're onto something that, hey, like if we keep doing this at the same courses and the same events, that might be the weeks that we just tend to go a little bit heavier or hammer it down a little bit more, our points across to get our points across. So
we were actually having that exact conversation in the PGA Discord last night. I wrote an article for baseball today that had to do with a lot of that conversation. Basically, it goes into the use of satellites and qualifiers to kind of up your investment, if you will, or at least increase your ceiling when you feel like your edge is largest. So anyone can go check that out. One last thing I want to mention when it comes to this whole topic and the Byron Nelson as a whole is I like your point about Ben Coles, and I think one of the most important things to realize when it comes to Coles is that, and again, he's just like an example of guys. For every year, it seems like there's a Ben Coles who is very short off the tee, happens to contend because they play really well with their irons, something like that. And so maybe the next year we're going to get more of the same. Hey, if Ben Coles could contend here, that means you don't need distance and iron play is all that matters. Well, we know that that's not the case. And so why is that happening? And I think the thing to realize is year after year, this is not a very strong field. And when it's not a very strong field, you get more of this type of player. The guy who isn't very long off the tee, can spike with his irons. Like you said, every single guy in the PGA Tour is capable of getting hot and having a really, really good week. And so the reason why we see the Ben Coles prototype play well here year after year is just because there are more of those guys in the field than we're accustomed to seeing. Some of them are bound to find their way to the top of the leaderboard. When they do, the last thing we want to do is overreact to that, stick to what the course fit model is saying. And again, doing so has given us 2 straight takedowns. So hopefully we can make it 3 in a row next year, but we got a lot of golf in between now and then. We can continue to take advantage of this course fit model 4.
Yeah. And if we had 5 Coles in contention around the leaderboard, then we would be having a completely different discussion. Right. But if it's 1, I think we've shown that we can overcome that 1. And I'm not even positive that like all these takedowns that FTN had Coles 1 and Pendrith not 1, that actually would have made a difference in the finals. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I think it might have hurt some of the guys. I can tell you it would have helped me. It would have helped me because I didn't have Pendrith. And so those extra 10 bonus points for him winning instead of getting second place knocked me from first to second in the 3-entry contest that I was in. Fortunately, though, still got the 2 $4,444 tickets for the PGA Championship. So always nice to make a major that much more exciting.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I think you kind of had the same idea happen for Augusta too. So hopefully you can do a little bit more with these at the PGA and really take advantage of them. So, but once again, we can lean back into beating a dead horse here. The volatility gives you a chance to when you do capitalize it should be something really nice.
Before we go on to the Wells Fargo Championship in Quail Hollow, I want to ask you, how was U.S. Open qualifying for you? What did you kind of take from the round? Was it just nice to be back in competition, even if you didn't get everything out of it that you wanted?
I played so bad. It was 0 fun, to be honest. Like I was miserable. What are you doing? But, at the same time, I kind of know better. I would say that this is the least work I've put into coming into competition. Usually if I know I'm going to play, I'll spend, a couple of weeks getting ready, at least, practicing 4 or 5, maybe even 6 times a week.
Yep.
Our golf course was underwater. The greens were punched. I mean, I can give you a million excuses, but I just didn't really have anywhere to go and practice, and I just didn't have time with kids' sports and stuff. And so I think that I walked away more than anything saying, all right, if I'm going to do this, let's do it right. There's no use to being out there wasting my time. And, I'm shot 78, I think, or something. My worst tournament round in as long as I can remember. Obviously, it's embarrassing. I didn't like it, but it's part of golf. And really, to be honest, as little as I've competed, I'm fairly lucky I've never done that before. I think the biggest deal was the greens were not very good, so I couldn't take advantage of making a lot of 4 to 10 footers just with really poor greens.
Yeah, it's also one of those things where, like, you either qualify or you don't. So once you don't have a chance, there's not a whole lot of incentive to like grind out a 76 or something like that.
Yeah, or even 73 for that matter. And the scores are pretty high. I mean, it played pretty hard. The golf was very tricky. It would have been actually, if I was in form, it'd be a great golf course for me. It really was. But I started driving it bad, and when you drive it bad on a narrow, kind of goofy golf course, it sucks. It wasn't very fun. Yeah. I mean, I hit one and I thought I hit it right down the middle, and it was in literally the dead center of a lake, and I was like, whoa, I guess it's come on. But yeah, how'd you play?
So I had kind of the polar opposite round that I did a year ago. If you remember a year ago, right on the show, we were talking about the fact that like I was really struggling on the front and just kind of kept it together, was scoring a lot better than I was playing. And therefore I had a chance to get it together for the last like 6 holes. I started to play really, really well, got back to even par, and ended up being first alternate, didn't get the call for sectionals. This year I played awesome for like 12 holes and got nothing out of it. I scored so much worse. The best example I can give is the second hole, my 11th of the day, difficult par 5. There was a strong, like maybe 20-mile-an-hour wind just straight across left to right. Bomb a driver over a fairway bunker. I had 224 in. So wind into my face and from the left, 224. 225 is my 4-iron. So I say to my caddy, Scott, I'm like, I had set up to the ball, backed off. I'm like, do I need to go to the 3-iron here with this wind? We talked through it. I settled on the 4-iron because long is death, and it was only 206 to the front. Now, I'm not trying to like kill the 4-iron now. I'm just saying, hey, I'm going to make the regular 4-iron swing. This way I know I'll be short of the hole instead. I make a perfect swing. Hit the ball so well, flies right through the wind, lands back of the green, kicks like 3 inches into rough. If it doesn't get to the rough, it takes the slope back down to the pin. I've got like 8 feet for eagle. Instead, the chip shot, all I can do is try to land it as soft as possible, hit a good one, still end up 20 feet by, miss the birdie putt. I think I lipped out. It's just like every hole felt like that, where I was executing well and I just wasn't getting out of it what I needed. So for 12 holes, I played awesome golf and then just kind of limped through the finish, not playing as well. At that point, I kind of knew I needed to make 4 or 5 birdies in a row or something just to have a chance. And so started to force a little bit, make some mistakes that way, but still felt really good about the way that I hit the ball, particularly my irons. Like I made the joke to my dad. I was like, if I had always hit my irons like that, I would have been on tour by now, because that's always been the weakest part of my game. It was nice to hit the ball that well. It was nice to be in competition, but just like you, I don't play enough anymore for moral victories. So at the end of the day, didn't really get anything out of it, but it was still a lot of fun.
And that's what, just to reiterate your point of like these one-day qualifiers, even when you are in form, it doesn't take much to get behind the 8 ball and then ultimately have no chance, right? I mean, it's a hard, and it's funny because I walked out there and, putting aids everywhere and stretching and laying on the ground with their Theraguns and not that I don't blame them, right? I did it at one time too, but just the different place in life that you are. And, there's so many people that walk off just completely, out of their mind that they just spent the money and with, very little chance or nothing really to show for it. So, the perspective is always good. I'm going to probably start to get my head to the grindstone here a little bit with Mid-Am and USAM, and then I'm exempt into the Texas State AM, which the winner gets into the USAM this year. So just kind of an extra chance to do something. We're playing Trinity Forest, which I don't know if you remember, the PGA Tour played there, the Nelson a couple of years there. It's terrible.
Was that one a Wise one?
Yes.
I wonder if we'll see him again anytime soon. It's been a while now.
It's funny you brought that up. I asked who did I see? Somebody on the tour the other day about it. I don't remember. Anyway, I was out at Merida where a bunch of tour players, and we got to talking, and he said he saw him this winter playing, and he seemed fine, but just in a bad headspace. I can't really confirm or deny that. I just from all accounts, like they said he was playing golf and looked good. Everything looked good. There's just something going on that we don't know about.
There's one other thing I wanted to say in regards to my qualifying round. I think this is interesting as it relates to kind of everything that we do on this show and how we talk about like how volatile golf is. I think this is a really good way to make that point. So the course that I played is called Country Club of York. It's an absolutely phenomenal golf course. And the Golf Association of Philadelphia does a phenomenal job of setting it up to be really challenging. And one of the ways they do that is hole after hole after hole, the approach shots present a really unique challenge where there's a pretty clear side of the hole that you'd like to putt from. Like there's one side where the putts are straighter, they're uphill. And then there's one side of the hole that the putts break a ton, they're downhill, they're quick, you have to be defensive on. And time again, where you have to actually aim on your approach shot is to the tougher side of the hole to putt on. So for example, like maybe it's the pin is all the way on the right side. You can't miss right because right of the pin is death. And yet if you're on the green putting from right of the hole, it's a really easy putt. If you're left of the hole, if you're a little beyond the hole, which is again is like right where you're aiming, that's going to be the most difficult putt. And so one of the reasons why I felt like I wasn't getting as much out of the round as I normally would, or as I felt like I should have, was I kept hitting my exact line with my irons, which again, I don't do very often. And I kept giving myself the really, really difficult putt that I then couldn't make, even though I was hitting really good putts. So when we talk about like the volatility of golf, it's not just about how difficult it is to play well on a given day, but there's also then a lot of volatility around you can play great, but you're still going to need some good fortune to have the score that you want to have.
Yeah, and so and this is just difference, and this is the way that I think, and I don't want to go. I could do a whole show about this in itself, but where I live, we play on a lot more Bermuda. Tends to be a little bit more grainy, where that matters in qualifiers. Unlike a tournament where you just kind of take your chances of where they come. When I'm in qualifiers, I know I got to make a lot of birdies. I actually try to hit my ball above the hole a lot. Yeah. I know it'll be I know I have to, be a little bit more defensive. I know it'll be faster. But just here, the downgrade putts roll so much better and so much truer than anything into the grain. Yeah. So I kind of taking everything that you're taught in golf and doing the opposite. Whereas I feel like I'm a really high IQ player. I just do it different.
Yeah. And we've talked about this concept before where like downhill putts, gravity tends to put the ball back online. Just like when you're hitting the ball downwind, it's a lot harder to, have a 5-yard cut end up just going off the side of the world. Whereas if you're into the wind, every miss, every shot that's just a little bit offline gets thrown further offline. So I'm typically with you on that. It's just, I'd rather have a putt that moves, that starts or that needs to start outside right and is uphill. I can hit it hard and know it's going to go in, versus one that I'm just like, I'm standing with my chest facing the hole because I need to start it straight sideways and it's just going to fall to the right, as I had a couple of them after some really good shots. So again, fun experience. I think the cool part is being able to relate that to what we talk about here on the show every week about the volatility of golf and how we can use that to our advantage when people get a little bit too confident in what they think is going to happen.
Yeah, and it's just I don't know. Well, you play very different golf up there than I do. I mean, that's just all there is to it. Like anybody that, and actually, you probably play more golf like you saw at Craig Ranch than we do. We don't have very many golf. We don't have much golf like that with Zoysia fairways and bentgrass greens. You'd be right at home out there. Hit it far in the air and play bentgrass.
Yeah, I was going to say we also have very different games. That one would have fit my game pretty well, I think.
Maybe that's why I hate it so much. Maybe that's why I'm just completely against it. So it's just so stupid.
Who knows?
Uh,
Maybe our DFS games are the same. It's but man, let's talk about Quail Hollow and Wells Fargo this week, because although it's another elevated event, no cut event, I do think that our edge is pretty strong this week because the course fit model is so incredibly unique. The weights on driving in particular are huge. A 50% boost for driving distance predictive value, 63% boost for driving accuracy. Typically, we see like one or the other between driving distance and driving accuracy kind of pull the other one down. So as one goes up, the other goes down. Not the case this week. They both matter a ton. And so when you get the guy who's long and accurate, like a Rory McIlroy, you just get this insane course fit that when people are going to go back and they're going to look at, course history at this golf course, they're going to see how well Rory has done here. They're going to say, oh, it's something about this golf course. It's not something. It's the fact that both aspects of driving matter so much. And for years and years and years, he has been among the absolute best in both of those aspects. Clearly been one of the best drivers of the golf ball in the entire history of the sport. So absolutely love this course fit model. And then approach play and around the green play pretty much right around their typical averages. Putting 30% decrease in predictive value. So it's basically just all about how good you are off the tee here, and then a little bit of approach and around the green to go with it.
Yeah, you kind of stole what I was going to say there about Rory. I was like, yeah, just like everybody's like, oh, I wonder why Rory always played good here. It's just because I think it just shows how great of a driver the golf ball he is in general, which, I mean, I think how many times we've talked about this, like peak Rory was maybe the best we've ever seen. So, there's a couple of interesting things here. A lot of people that listen all the time know that I'm big on defending and then especially winning back-to-back weeks. I think we might find a spot again where a guy like Wyndham Clark might be above the defending, right? It might be just a different issue. So I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying I'm not going to automatically throw out a guy like Wyndham Clark because he has been so good in these elevated events lately.
Who do you think is going to be the people's favorite this week, whether it's Rory, Schauffele, Clark, Oberg? Where do you think people are going to spend their money, particularly on DraftKings, but also in the outright market?
I've already seen a ton of Rory. I think Rory winning 2 weeks ago. Rory obviously carried that team. And Lowry even said so. He's like, I just literally just jumped on his back and rode it. And that's what I love about Lowry, right? Is you're always going to get the honest everything. I'd be surprised if we don't see everybody kind of go back to the Rory Schauffele deal. That just makes the most sense. I think we both are going to agree on who we're going to play and who, as far as that goes. I don't see really anybody. You've got a guy that just won 2 weeks ago that we know is working hard to get back into form when we know the course fits him really well. Mm-hmm. I just see, and I'm guessing 9, 10, 11 to 1. I haven't looked yet, but I'm guessing that's probably about what you get Rory with Scheffler in the field, or with Scheffler not in the field. I would think like this is one of the few times that if I wish Scheffler was playing, because I think I would lean over to more of a Rory and you would get a much better price.
He's 800 to 1. I don't see many people betting that, but I do think it's a reflection of how confident people are in Rory on this golf course. So I do think he'll be pretty popular on DraftKings. Oberg is the super, super interesting one to me. He's at 12 to 1. I'm not going to bet that, but as it pertains to DraftKings, first, only $10,300 for Oberg compared to $11,800 for Rory and $11,500 for Xander. So you get a big discount. I am hopeful, but I'm hopeful that he won't be too popular, but I don't predict that that's going to be the case. I think he's going to be really popular. I think he's going to be amongst the chalkiest players of the entire week, but it's worth noting. He's first in our expected strokes gained, so not even Rory. Oberg is the guy who's first in expected strokes gained. He's also now passed Rory in terms of combined driving projected strokes gained for us. So 0.31 distance for Oberg, 0.34 for Rory, 0.36 strokes gained per round with driving accuracy for Oberg, 0.28 for Rory. So He has slightly surpassed him there, and he's more volatile event to event. So in our simulations, Oberg wins 9% of the time compared to 5.6% for Rory. That's a really, really large and somewhat unexpected outcome for us, discrepancy, I should say, in our simulations. I love Oberg this week. Really, really hope that he's not too popular because I'd love to start lineups with him. I'd even like to start lineups with like Rory and Oberg, just go all in on the driving kind of aspect of it, because with the no cut event, we know we're going to be able to find some guys down below that at least can score well and will be fairly good options anyway.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, right? Obviously, I'm looking for guys that drive it well. And I'm on board for Oberg. I think as long as he's not overly owned, I think that's where we have to go one and done now that we've jumped back up inside the top 200 or 250 or so.
Yep.
But do you see, a week like this, do you see a guy like Zalatoris that withdrew last week as being at a huge discount at 7,900? So let's say he did play last week as one of the favorites and finished, let's just call it 10th for lack of a better way. Where does do we all of a sudden see value in that WD, or do you kind of just throw that out the door?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The first thing that I noticed when I look through Zalatoris' numbers is that his distance advantage has pretty much disappeared. He's still gaining off the tee because he's accurate off the tee, but only 0.03 strokes gained per round against this field with driving distance. That's where Sungjae's at. That's slightly behind Akshay Bhatia. So the distance advantage that he used to have is pretty much gone. I don't know if that's related to the swing change. I don't know if that just means that he's still getting healthier from his back and maybe that distance will return later in the year. Don't know. But to me, like that's going to keep him from really popping for me. And I don't know that I could go there for one and done. I think I'd be more interested from a DFS perspective.
I think that's more what I meant. It's like he's all the way down at 7,900. Like, is he more of an 8,800 to 9,100 if he plays last week?
Yeah, I think he would be. Even if the price is where it would be, I think the more interesting question is he going to be 5% where he would have been 15% if he played well last week? That's the kind of discrepancy. That's the kind of effect that would really draw me to him, because he could end up with a really good GPP score if his ownership ends up that low. So that I think is a very, very interesting one to look at. In terms of outrights, let me give some of these win probabilities that we have, and let me know if any of them stand out to you. We've got Benny on at 2.8%. Finau 2.4%, despite the fact that Finau, his expected strokes gained has really kind of tanked. He's only at 0.3 this week, but he's the most volatile player in the field in event-to-event standard deviation, and we know he's pretty damn good off the tee. So better fit than usual, high volatility. So he's got a 2.4% chance to win. Let's see what Finau's odds are. Using the prop shop, we've got Finau at
50.
40. So yeah, if it was 50, that would be one that like I was making immediately. At 40, it's close. I do think there's some value there, but it's not one that I'm going to run to. I also don't necessarily see Finau going from like 40 to 35 or 30. I think it's more likely that he would drop to 45 or 50. So I think that's the way I'm going to play that. Some other names: Adam Scott 3%. I think that's really interesting. Lowry 2.5. Straka 2.2. Lucas Glover 2.0. Any of those stand out to you as potential great values or worth discussing further?
Yeah. So, and we kind of discussed this a little bit. Obviously, I think all the names that you just read off, we kind of think of them as all good drivers of the golf ball. So that's why I think that's why they're popping here, right? It's just you're seeing your elite drivers of the golf ball, Adam Scott, et cetera, come to the top. I think that you've been a huge proponent that the whole industry betting market is behind on Adam Scott, trying to get him ahead of the game. I think this is another week where that's very reasonable and can be done. But every week it seems to me we end up on a few of the same guys, basically no matter what the course is. Siwoo Kim, Lucas Glover out of that list, Adam Scott. Is there ever any a point where like a guy like Lucas Glover, right? We haven't, even Adam Scott really hasn't been in serious contention to win. You know, like we haven't seen them. Do you ever see these numbers and go, okay, sure, all of my analytics point to these guys, all the numbers point to these guys, but I haven't really seen them compete. And we know they're not gaining the strokes in certain aspects that we want them to win, and you just kind of move them down in your model a little bit.
God, I love this question so much. This is such an awesome discussion. So let's look at Lucas Glover, because I think he's the perfect example here where he has played well this season, like without question. But to your point, he hasn't even sniffed contention. Like his best finish is 11th at the Valspar. So he keeps rating really well in our expected win odds. He rates well in our expected strokes gained. And he's got this high expected event-to-event standard deviation. So where is that coming from? Why is that continuing? One thing I'll say here is if he like does this for an entire season, then things are going to change. He's no longer going to have a high expected event-to-event standard deviation. That would come down. That in and of itself would lower his win odds, so we'd find less value. The expected strokes gained, obviously, they'd go down if he started playing poorly. He hasn't played poorly. He is continuing to gain strokes. But let's look at his last 4 events, because I think they tell this story really, really well. So at the Valspar, he gained 1.85 true strokes gained, 1.27 at the Valero, 1.75 at the Masters, 0.9 at the RBC Heritage. For context, like Colin Morikawa, Sahith Theegala, Hideki Matsuyama, they're at a quarter strokes gained projected this week per round for us. So these numbers that Glover's putting up are really good. 1.85, 1.3, 1.8, 0.9. Again, those are really, really solid. But to your point, they're not close to contention. In order to have a chance to win, in order to even contend in a field like this, you're probably going to need +3 to +5, +3 to +3.5 minimum. And you probably even need to get to like +4, +4.5. If Scotty's in the field, you probably need to get to +5.5 because he's on a whole other planet. But so to your point, like how do we look at a guy like Glover and continue to bet him, continue to say he's got this high win equity when he's not showing anything close to that? And what I would point you to is go deeper than just where has he finished and what his, how many strokes has he gained, and look at the individual categories where, so for example, at the Masters, he gained 0.85 strokes per round putting. At the Valspar, he gained 1.6 around the green per round. At the Valero, he gained 1.5 with approach, and he's usually gaining between a quarter and half a stroke off the tee. If you get all of those best aspects and you get them to come together in 1 week, now you're looking at a guy who's gaining 4.25 to 4.5 strokes that week per round. And all of a sudden, now you've got a guy who has the ceiling to win a golf tournament in this kind of field because of the way that his game has like been volatile, where his weaknesses and strengths in 1 week are changing and canceling each other out. And so he's getting this like just a line of really, really consistent play of +0.7, +1, +1, +0.3, +1.9, +1.3, +1.8, +0.9. Like that's a little bit of an illusion, right? His game hasn't been anywhere near as consistent as his results have suggested. It's just that he's spiked and had weaknesses in different places, different weeks. So again, I absolutely love this question because it allows me to be really, really nerdy in my answer. All of which is to say, I think Glover's still a really good bet. We've got him at 2%. He's available at 100 to 1. That's a lot of value.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's just a collective. We know it's in there. Can you do it all at the same time? And just listening to that, the only thing that immediately came to mind is your example. And I haven't looked at this. This isn't. But you talked about strokes gained putting. I don't know if he's gained anywhere except for Augusta. But to me, which I don't know what the numbers say. This is just me. But knowing as a golfer, putting at Augusta might seem harder to everybody else, but it's actually easier because you're just hitting it out to this area with proper speed and you're not holing a lot. Your best putters in the world make straight in 10-footers that are dead into the green. Mm-hmm. You're not looking at hitting it out to an area with certain speed, right? So and the people that have won outside of maybe Tiger, right? Like, you've seen volatile putters win. Adam Scott was really volatile when he won. A bunch of that. So anyway, that would be my only devil's advocate, but I'm sure that Lucas Glover's putted well at other places, and we know it's in there. We saw the run at the end of last year where we thought that maybe he had just turned over a completely new leaf. I think we know now that that's maybe not the case. But like you said, all we need is for the industry to say, okay, we all know that he shows in these models, but we can't back him because he's never in contention. Whereas if you dig deeper and do this the right way, we can see he's gaining in every category. And if the course fits there, which it obviously is, it shows up in the model again, it might be another interesting leverage point against everybody else. And he's also one of those players that his A game can compete in this field. Mm-hmm. He's not like some of those other guys that are down there at the bottom that you wonder if their A game could compete in this field. Yep. Obviously, we're pretty positive most of them could, but are more likely. And I'll give you another side of that is a guy like Seb Straka, who's won at the Deer, right? Could he do – whose upside is higher here, even though you get Lucas Glover at a better price? I don't know if that all makes sense or coordinates together, but that's just the way that I see it as a whole.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. The other thing I'll say is it's a really interesting point that you make with his putting because he hasn't had the spike with his putter. He hasn't shown any sign of the type of life that we saw from it last year. So if you remember, he gained over a stroke per round putting at the Rocket Mortgage, finished fourth, gained again the following week, finished sixth at the John Deere, then finished fifth at the Barbasol. A couple weeks later, he wins the Wyndham and wins the FedEx St. Jude, gaining at or above a stroke per round putting in each of those events as well. So we saw signs of life, and then the big spikes came and he got the wins. This year, we haven't seen those signs of life. The closest we've gotten, as you said, he gained 0.85 at the Masters. He at one point had lost strokes putting in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 consecutive events before he gained 0.2 per round at the Valspar, lost at the Texas Open, gained at Augusta, and then gained 0.03 at the Heritage. Can we say 3 out of the last 4 weeks gaining, even though 2 of them were very tiny gains, are the type of signs of life we need to see? Or would you even say we don't necessarily need to see signs of life just because we saw it last time? We know that he's capable of gaining 0.5 per round in any given event. And if the ball striking, if the tee to green game is there, that might be all he needs.
Yeah, and maybe it's a grass type thing, right, as well. He won last year in Memphis, where it was Bermuda. Some of his spikes outside of Augusta, which I just touched on the volatility there of why I don't think that matters at all. Mm-hmm. Maybe the change back to Bermuda here and not everybody's like, well, in Texas, and whatever, that was all. It's just, maybe we get a comfort level back here of back in Bermuda and maybe just, take advantage of the spike. And we talk about it all the time. Let's just try to be ahead of the game of when it, and if it does spike or when it does spike, then, hopefully we're ahead of it.
Adam Scott, by the way, available 55-1. I will be betting that for sure as well. That's available on Caesars or FanDuel. Even DraftKings has it at 50. I'm not entirely sure what bet I want to make on Glover yet. Again, he's available at 100-1. That's the best available at BetMGM. Also 90-1 at FanDuel. 80-1 at Bet Rivers with an each way. I need to double check what he's at on Bet365 as well. He's definitely one where I would rather have an each way, even if I have to give up. If I only have to give up 10 points, I know I'm going to do that. If it's 20, if I have to go from 100 to 80 for the each way, now it's starting to get to the point where I need to dig into the math a little bit to figure out which one I like more. Adam Scott, there's no question. I'm going with the pure outright at 55 instead of dropping to 33, which I would need to do for the each way. Do you have anything to add there on Glover? Is there a specific turning point that you can point to say, I'd want the each way at this number, otherwise I'll just go to the pure outright at 100?
For him, he's one of the few that I think it's just going to be personal preference because, you know, he reeled off all those top 6 finishes. So we know that's possible. Yeah. But also he won a couple of times in that same stretch. So, it just becomes a math problem, I think. And, you know, maybe the elevated event might lean me more to the each way, to where if it was just a regular event, I would probably just go with the win, especially when you got a guy like Oberg and guys like Oberg and McIlroy that are just seem to be so head and shoulders above everybody else here as far as driving. They could just, I wouldn't be surprised to see either one of those guys run off and leave the field this week.
What's your guess for Thigala's odds here at the Wells Fargo? And are you surprised that his price is only $9,100 on DraftKings?
I'm not surprised at all at 9,100. I think that's probably about right. And I think that's probably about where people see him. Mm-hmm. I would guess he's probably in the 50s to 60s.
For the Wells Fargo.
Yeah. I mean, that's where he should be the way he's playing.
Thigala?
Yeah.
I think you're not doing him justice. He's only 30 to 1.
Yeah, I would have guessed 50s. I just don't think the 30 to 1 on him in this field just doesn't. I still I think he's very good. I just think that there's at least 10 or 12 clear-cut players better than him. And so it just makes it harder. I mean, it makes it harder for me to get behind any number less than 50. And that's kind of my cutoff too, of just the way I think of hey, I need this guy to be 50 to get on board. I think that I would much rather play Adam Scott at 50 than Thigala at 30.
That I agree with. That I definitely agree with. But I will say, I think there's also value here on Thigala. He's he's tied for 4th in our expected strokes gained. He's 4th without much competition in our win odds because of how volatile he is week to week. This guy, 2nd place, 9th, 6th, 5th, 2nd, and a win back in September. The guy just spikes, and he spikes a ton. He's the perfect example of a guy who, when he plays well, he plays really well. He's doing it more and more often now in elevated events and really strong fields. 2nd at the Heritage, 9th at the Players, 6th at the API. I don't think he should be anywhere near 30. I think he should be 20. That's what our model suggests. I like this number. More than that, I hope he's contrarian on DraftKings because, man, he's in a kind of a loaded tier talent-wise where Morikawa, Hovland, Thigala, Hideki, all of these guys could draw some serious popularity, particularly Hideki and Morikawa, I think, based on their form. I hope Thigala slips through the cracks because if he does, he will be amongst the highest GPP scores for sure. I would love to play him this week. We don't have him available on one and done. It sounds like we are pretty in lockstep here that Oberg is our top choice.
Yeah, I don't think the only other person that I would think about using is Wyndham Clark.
We don't have him available.
We've already used him. So outside of that, and the only reason that I would use Wyndham Clark is he just continues to pop in these loaded events.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest deal. It's kind of like I kept waiting for a fall off and it just never happened. Right. And he just keeps working his way into contention. Which, we haven't really mentioned him much. And I'm usually against playing the defending champion. I just think this would be a place that I might think about it. And depending on how I build my DraftKings lineup, if I don't start Rory, Oberg, and build from there, I think that you'll see Wyndham Clark in my other lineups.
This is definitely a week where I don't have a strong preference towards going double stud all the way at the top or doing more balanced. I'm just purely going to wait for the GPP scores because I think every single avenue kind of has a strong argument for it. So I just want to do what other people aren't doing and be unique in that way since they're all good. Last range to really discuss, I think. Siwoo Kim, 8,600. Russell Henley, Alex Noren, Benny On, all in the low 8,000s. A lot of the same names as this last week, kind of once again in the same pricing tiers. Where do you think that you're going to go here? If everybody was the same ownership, who would be your favorite in this range? Which also includes, by the way, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, so guys who haven't played as well, but certainly have more name value associated with them.
Yeah, so you kind of ruined what I'm going to personally go to on, and I would actually think about going to Finau. What I was going to say is I really hope that Justin Thomas is super low owned because I'm not afraid to go there.
Yeah.
But he would be only because he's low owned.
It's interesting. Of the two guys who fit that category, JT and Spieth, Spieth is the one who's actually more interesting to me because he's driven the ball really well. Kind of a deviation from what we're accustomed to seeing. Usually when Spieth is struggling, it's because he just can't put the driver in play enough to take advantage of the rest of his game. Driving's been a strength. He's gained distance, so he's become one of the longer guys now. Not like super, super long, but a very respectable 0.2 strokes gained per round right now with driving distance. That's right in line with JT, only slightly behind Cam Young. It's ahead of Sam Burns. Like the guy's really become one of the longer hitters on tour, and he's actually gaining with accuracy even as he's gained in distance. So I am interested in that regard. He's also one of the most volatile guys event to event. So when he's got his A game, he plays well. Consequently, he has a 2% chance to win, much better than JT's 1.1%. So I'm hoping Spieth is the guy who's contrarian in this range, but man, it's loaded. And I would love to play Siwoo. I'd love to play Benny On. I don't think you could find many guys who are a better fit for this course than On. One of the absolute longest. In fact, he might be the single longest in this field. He is. Ben On has the highest expected strokes gained through driving distance in the field at 0.36, Rory at 0.34. And then Benny also gains a fair amount with accuracy off the tee, good around the greens, pretty good with his irons. His iron play's actually gotten quite a bit better over the last few weeks. We just need a spike with the putter, and putting is far less predictive this week than most. So I really like On's course fit. In fact, he's got 2.8% chance to win. Let's see what his odds are here at the Wells Fargo, 45. So, man, we got a handful of bets that we might make, none that we've made so far, but this could be a really fun week in the outright market, as well as, of course, one and done, and DraftKings just continuing to hopefully go in the very, very, very correct direction.
Yeah, and On what ended up being our one and done, and just a backdoor like 4th or 6th or whatever he finished, which obviously helped us. So obviously I'd rather win, but yeah, I was super, and I think it probably went a little bit overlooked. He didn't get much airtime. Well, but he didn't get any airtime because the coverage continued to suck like it has.
That was, I'm not exaggerating, that was like the clear-cut worst broadcast of any sporting event that I can remember ever seeing. That was absolutely horrible. We don't need to get too into it. We've already gone over 45 minutes, but that was spectacularly bad.
It's so disappointing, and it continues to be shitty week after week after week. And they just don't – it's like they don't even care. I mean, it was a great golf tournament, and I didn't want to watch because we didn't get to see anything.
It wasn't just the BB Go commercial, which it's actually a fine commercial if I don't have to watch it 800 times in the span of 40 minutes.
Hey, it did its job. Everybody's talking about it.
That's for sure. They even kept playing it on like the playing through. It would just be like, oh, you just watched a commercial 30 seconds ago. Well, here's another one. We're just going to play the BB Go while we showed you the playing through, and then we'll take you right back. It's driving me crazy. But it was also like they went 15 minutes at a time without showing any shot except for the guys in the final group. It was just atrocious. It was like they completely mailed it in and had no interest whatsoever in selling the fact that a really good golf tournament was going on. They made the golf tournament seem boring and like it was a 2-man race or a 3-man race when there were 10 guys still involved or something like that. It was just absolutely awful.
Yeah, but like you said, we don't want to get into it too much. But yeah, overly disappointing, and yeah, we'll just call it like it is, and it's bad. Final
question. All the way down at the bottom, we got some names that are kind of common that we talk about: Lucas Glover, Taylor Moore, Austin Eckroat, Jake Knapp. What is your kind of takeaway from Knapp's performance? Are you in on him at 6,500? Does he need to be super contrarian for you to be in? What's your thoughts down here?
I don't really know what to think. he played well. Obviously, we talked about him playing well. We thought he was going to play well. He did a lot of really good things. Hell, he was 3 back or whatever through 9, and I still thought he was going to win the golf tournament. I don't really have a thought yet on him for this week. I don't think he'll be bothered, so to speak, by not playing well yesterday. I just don't. The one that stands out to me is the disrespect of Ben Coles being literally the lowest salary on DraftKings.
You won't convince me that he should be any more expensive. He's dead last in expected strokes gained for us, and it just stems from the fact he loses a third of a stroke per round driving distance and doesn't gain any of it back with his accuracy off the tee. I kind of think
it's just funny to me. Like it's just a funny, like you got the guy that literally should have won or had a very good chance of winning, and you're going to send him out the next week and you're just going to give him no respect at all. And I think it just shows you, like, if you took it all the way back to our Craig Ranch conversation, though, like the volatility of golf and how, like, unpredictable golf can be, because he popped when nobody thought he would. So anyway, it just stood out. When you scroll and you see stuff stand out, that was one of the things. And Knapp was another. 6,500 Knapp was another thing that kind of stood out of, man, I can't believe he's that cheap this week. Mid sevens I could understand, and there's a lot of guys. I just don't think that the general idea is that he is that good yet. We'll hopefully keep him at 6,500. The problem is I think he's going to be pretty high owned.
It's funny. At the beginning of the season, the only thing we heard about Knapp, like when the first few times he showed up on a leaderboard, like at Farmers, for example, he ended up finishing third, but no one knew he was going to finish third. So we barely saw any of him on Thursday and Friday. We saw a little bit on Saturday, and we finally started to see him on Sunday. But all we heard was this young guy can absolutely bomb the ball. He's all about distance off the tee. He is one of the best iron players in the world already, or at least he has played that way this season, gained 1.3 per round again this past week at the Byron Nelson, putted pretty well. So, like, his recipe for success has very clearly been dominate with your irons, capitalize on the greens by being a pretty good putter. And then I don't really know what to make of his off the tee play, because he's one of the very few players on tour who it almost seems like he's most volatile off the tee, and you kind of know what you're going to get in the rest of his game. Yeah, he had a couple really bad putting weeks, like at the Houston Open, and then wasn't very good at the Masters. He's had some really bad weeks around the green, like at the Heritage, but for the most part, he's been pretty neutral around the green. He has been great at times off the tee. He has been horrible at times off the tee. The thing that I don't like, and I've talked about this a bunch this year, he loves to go away from the big driver and hit this mini driver. Consequently, this past week at the Byron Nelson, which was a golf course that really, really accentuated distance, didn't really, accuracy wasn't nearly as important as it sometimes can be. You even mentioned the fact that it's hard to miss big at Craig Ranch. He missed big a few times, and he missed big even when dialing down to the mini driver. I think the best way I can say it is he doesn't strike me as somebody who's confident off the tee right now. At Wells Fargo, you're probably going to need to do really well off the tee, which means you're going to need to be confident off the tee. That's my big hesitation. What do you think of that?
I will say this. I thought he hit driver a lot on Sunday. It sure seemed like it. We got to see him every shot, so we should be able to go rewatch it. But he hit driver a lot on Sunday, or at least the first, I think I watched through 10 holes or something where I couldn't handle it anymore. But I know he hit driver on – I know he hit driver on 8, 9, 10. He hit driver on 6, where, holes that he didn't necessarily have to. He hit driver on 5. He hit driver on 2. 1, you can't hit driver. Everybody's hitting hybrid or 3-wood. So he hit the regular driver a lot on Sunday. I don't know if he did that all week, but I'm guessing he did.
He did on the front. So to me, the golf tournament changed. He had birdied 9, and then he made a great birdie on 10 and was right there again. And
did he hit mini driver on 11?
He hit mini driver on 11, and then he hit mini driver again on 12, pulled it way left into the trees. Data Golf has him losing 0.9 strokes on that drive. Pendrith bombed one 330 down the fairway. That's when the golf tournament changed. That's when Pendrith beat Knapp. That's not when Pendrith won the golf tournament because obviously Coles was there, but he beat Knapp on number 12. Knapp kind of beat himself there because he took driver out of his own hands. He just didn't trust himself to step up and make the swing that Pendrith made. You can make an argument that, hey, maybe it fit Pendrith's draw and it didn't fit his cut, but
it does.
So many times I've seen that from Knapp.
That whole now for mini driver on 11 is asinine. It's like a long straight up the hill dogleg right. Like you can't hit it anywhere bad with driver. So if he hit mini driver there, I have no idea what he was thinking. But
you know what? Actually, he may not have hit mini driver. In fact, I think I remember him hitting regular driver, but he tried to go to just a stinger cut type of thing, pulled it into the rough. He only hit it 280, which is why I was thinking automatically that it was the mini driver. But I actually remember the swing. It was the big driver, but it wasn't a let's hit this shot big driver swing. It was a let's guide this into the fairway. There's too much steering involved from him, I think. Again,
is that just his golf swing though? Is that just his golf? Like his golf swing kind of has that lazy look to it anyway.
But I'm not talking about the look of the swing. I'm talking about the flight. I'm talking about, it's a different, more abbreviated finish than what you usually see. We saw him go at the ball. The tee shot on 9, I thought, was an amazing sign because that's where he had pulled it left the day before. This time he bombs one 330 all out swing, left side of the fairway.
Perfect.
That was the type of swing that's like, man, if he was that confident, that committed every time he stepped on the tee with driver, I think he'd be a better player. Now, I'm sure there are times where he goes to the mini driver that he should go to it.
12 is like 12. 12, he hit a bad shot. I wouldn't put that as a bad decision. So most of the time that's a par 5. And they play the further back tees where you have to really if you're getting any roll at all, you have to draw it kind of around the corner there. And it's hard to tell. It's hard to see that on TV. Like it's not as apparent as it is real life. So the one on 12, I think I would probably go to more the dead pull is from a guide than it is from the club decision.
That's fair. That's fair. In fact, I think the point they were making on the broadcast, I think was actually a fairly good one too, which is he got steeper than usual, which to me says he's not being as patient in his transition as he usually is. So that's maybe something to watch for. But yeah, I think to your point, like Tiger, for example, has made famous the saying of playing aggressively to conservative spots. It's the same type of thing. I would be okay with the mini driver if he's then going up, making a really aggressive, committed golf swing. When he goes to a mini driver or when he has the driver and then goes to this Guido, I hope I don't screw this shot up type of swing, that's when I get worried. That's when I don't see a confident player. I want to see the confidence.
Short shoulder turn, kind of gets on top. Yeah, agree.
Yep. And we really see that in the distance numbers, right? We saw that at the API. We saw it at the Players. He only gained 2 yards per round and then lost 4 yards per round at the Players. The distance came back for 3 weeks and then shows up at the Byron Nelson, a golf course where we thought he was going to really unleash, and he only gained 6 yards while we were consistently seeing upper 180 ball speed because he continuously hit that guiding cut type thing. I want to see him unleash more. If we got more of the swings he made on 9 yesterday, I think that he would win more golf tournaments. Or not even that. I just think he'd be better suited for when he gets into contention. And I think we'd see fewer of these really bad weeks where it's just man, where is his game? I think it's just a confidence thing. Yeah.
And the other thing is he must have the 3-wood yips, because a guy like that I would think would be able to hit 3-wood just as far in the air, even if you just hit a 13-degree 3-wood, if you wanted a little extra out of it or whatever. So that there's something going on there too. There's more to the story. But anyway, yeah. I don't know. We'll wait and see.
What I really like about this event is I do think there are a lot of options down in this range. Like we mentioned, Glover, Moore, Knapp, Kitayama looks pretty good. JT Poston, maybe we go back to Keegan Bradley, something like that. So I do think it sets up fairly well. Regardless of where ownership goes, I'm very confident that we're going to have some GPP scores that pop. So very excited for this event in that regard. And man, it's cool to be in the top 250 of the Mayo Open in our joint entry for the one and done. So hopefully we can make a push, and it sounds like it's going to be Oberg that hopefully gets us the win this week.
Yep, sounds good. We'll see what happens, but yeah, if we could somehow get a win or even a top 5 this week, man, it really would be nice.
Last question. Anything that you're looking for this week in terms of helping you kind of get a good sense of where everybody's at for the PGA Championship?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you'll probably see some guys that have their mind on the PGA over even this week. With it being an Elevate event, they know they're going to get a paycheck anyway. You'll see more guys working on certain things, I believe. But I think once it gets tournament time, I think you'll see everybody give it their best this week. Just they're playing for so much money, it's hard to overlook the next week. I love the idea of total driving popping this week, because I think it gives us a clear cut into that's going to matter next week. So if they can drive it good here, I think they'll drive it good next week.
Victor Hovland is 31-1 right now to win the PGA Championship. That's a number that I'm going to keep my eye on. If he comes out and looks to be in better form than we've seen him in so far this season, that's a number that, like, if he finishes second this week, a week from today, he's not going to be 31-1. He's going to be 19-1 or 20-1, something like that. So if you can be ahead of the curve on Hovland being in good form, which doesn't just mean like, oh, he made 3 30-footers on the front 9, so he's at the top of the leaderboard. It means the ball striking is there. He's driving it well. His iron play is there. Maybe he's gotten up and down for birdies, hitting some really good pitch shots off of tight lies, that sort of thing. I'd be very interested in that. So he's someone I'm going to watch closely.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing we didn't talk about, what better way to come into form than winning? And Brooks Koepka just won last week.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's going to be a big conversation for One and Done next week, and of course for DraftKings as well. I can't wait for that PGA Championship show, by the way, in large part because now I've got 2 $4,000 tickets. So hopefully we can make another run at those. But thanks everybody for tuning in. We will catch you next time.